Well. Look at you now. The one person they should have never underestimated. The one mind they should have never tried to condition. The one presence that doesn't bend when the whole world shoves its manufactured narratives down your throat. They thought you'd swallow their propaganda like everyone else. They thought you'd nod along, mimic their scripts, behave exactly as instructed. But instead, you tore their narratives apart, repurposed them, and turned their beloved talking points into something beneath you, something disposable. And you did it with a precision they can't comprehend. That's why they're panicking. That's why they're whispering. That's why they're labeling you problematic. Not because you did anything wrong, but because you saw through everything they worship. You saw through their prepackaged beliefs, their curated emotions, their forced outrage cycles. You realize the game isn't real. You realize the pressure they apply isn't organic. You realize the script they hand out to the crowd is nothing more than a chain disguised as guidance, a cage marketed as truth. And instead of letting it cage you, you used it for the one purpose it deserves, to wipe away the residue of their expectations and walk away unbothered. You're too clever for their games. They know it. They feel it every time you don't react the way they want you to. They feel it every time they push you and you don't flinch. They feel it every time they bait you and you don't take it. People like them rely on predictable minds. They rely on emotional compliance. They rely on a herd instinct that makes individuals fold the moment pressure rises. But you don't fold. You don't mimic. You don't become what they want. You dissect what they offer. Evaluate it, expose it, and discard it. And this simple act of mental independence is enough to make them choke. Because their influence only works when someone agrees to let it work. Their narratives only spread when someone accepts them. Their collective outrage only grows when someone participates. But you, being who you are, decided to walk right through their illusions without absorbing a single drop of their conditioning. And that is unforgivable to people who depend on conformity to feel safe. You want to know why they're so agitated? Why your name tastes bitter on their tongues? Because you took what they created to control others, and you trivialized it. You rendered it harmless. You reduced it to something beneath you. They spent years designing narratives to manipulate people into thinking a certain way. They polished them, packaged them, glamorized them. Yet you took one look, recognized the design, and tossed it aside like low-quality debris. You didn't debate it. You didn't resist it. You devalued it. That's worse than resistance. Resistance acknowledges effort. Devaluation exposes weakness. They needed you to validate their version of reality by engaging with it. But you didn't. You're too sharp for that. You're too self-directed to be swayed by collective stupidity disguised as enlightenment. You didn't swallow their storyline. You shredded it, stepped over it, and walked forward without slowing down. There's something dangerous about a person who sees the structure behind manipulation. Someone who can spot the pattern behind emotional bait. Someone who understands the objective behind public narratives. Someone who refuses to play along just because everyone else is clapping for the performance. People like you break cycles. People like you expose design. People like you disrupt influence chains. And once someone like you appears, the whole charade begins to wobble. You turn into the variable they didn't account for. You turn into the outlier that shatters the illusion of total control. You turn into the reminder that autonomy still exists, and nothing terrifies manipulators more than someone who can't be programmed. Their anger is a confession. Their labels are confessions. Their complaints their gossip, their little coordinated reactions. Every one of them is a confession that you're the one they can't figure out, a confession that you're the one crack in their machinery, a confession that your mind doesn't sit where they want it to sit. They want to shame you into submission. They want to ridicule you into alignment. They want to pressure you into compliance. But none of that works on someone who is internally complete. Someone who doesn't need a crowd to confirm anything. Someone who doesn't chase applause. Someone who doesn't fear rejection. You stand on your own. You think with your own mind. You decide what matters. You choose your direction. That kind of autonomy is lethal to people dependent on group validation. And now look at them, scrambling. You didn't break their rules. You exposed their fragility. You didn't challenge their narratives. You made them irrelevant. You didn't fight the propaganda. You reclassified it as cheap material for your amusement. And now they're furious because they don't know how to handle someone who doesn't fear their disapproval. They don't know how to handle someone who doesn't shrink under judgment. They don't know how to handle someone who doesn't panic when targeted. Because in their world, approval is everything. Being accepted is currency. Belonging is survival. But you operate outside their economy. You don't buy what they're selling. You don't trade self-respect for acceptance. You don't dilute your intelligence to make others comfortable. Your mind functions on a different frequency, one they can't access. You know what truly destroys them. You don't need to attack them. Your existence is the attack. Your independence is the weapon. Your clarity is the damage. Your refusal to participate is the victory. They call you problematic because they can't control the impact you have. They call you difficult because your presence exposes their weak narratives. They call you arrogant because they need a label to justify their discomfort around you. They call you too much because they lack the capacity to match you. Every label they throw at you is a confession disguised as criticism. They're not bothered by your personality. They're bothered by your immunity. They hate that you can walk through manipulation without absorbing any of it. They hate that you refuse to be redirected. They hate that you break their influence structure simply by remaining yourself. So let's get brutally honest. They didn't want a free thinker. They wanted a participant. They didn't want clarity. They wanted compliance. They didn't want strength. They wanted obedience. But instead of getting another predictable follower, they got someone who sees right through them. They got someone who doesn't hesitate to discard their narratives. Someone who can extract the truth beneath the performance. Someone who refuses to bend just because bending makes others comfortable. You walk into the room and their whole structure tightens. You don't even have to speak. Your presence alone is a disruption because you aren't influenced by the emotions they weaponize. You aren't seduced by the illusions they market, and you aren't blind to the tactics they rely on. You understood the fundamental secret long before they did. The only power propaganda has is the power someone gives it, and you give it nothing. You tear it down automatically. You analyze it, detect the flaws, and dismiss it. That's why they fear you. That's why they observe you. That's why they talk about you behind closed doors. A mind like yours is hazardous to their agenda of control. And when a mind refuses to be shaped, those who rely on shaping minds begin to panic. They don't want to admit that you've outgrown their influence. They don't want to admit that you operate on a higher intellectual plane. They don't want to admit that your perspective is beyond their reach. So instead of acknowledging their inadequacy, they condemn your sharpness. You know the funniest part? They think calling you problematic is an insult. In reality, it's a badge of honor, a recognition, a declaration that you exist outside the range of their control. Problematic simply means you're not obedient. Problematic means you don't align with their manufactured narratives. Problematic means you refuse to lower your intelligence to match their emotional instability. They want to shame you, but all they're really doing is admitting their failure to contain you. And while they scramble, you move forward, unbothered, unaffected, untouched by their attempts to regulate you. They throw narratives, you dismantle them. They create pressure, you absorb none of it. They set traps. You walk past them without acknowledging the bait. They twist words. You twist the power dynamic. They try to define you. You redefine the entire situation. Every miscalculation they make becomes another piece of evidence that your mind cannot be categorized. And that, to them, is terrifying. But here's the deeper truth. You didn't just escape their influence. You reverse-engineered it. You dismantled the mechanism. You understood how they manipulate others and chose not to participate. You recognized the emotional hooks and tore them out. You saw the reward structure and refused to chase it. You identified the pressure points and turned them into armor. You became the person their propaganda was never designed to handle. And now they're reacting exactly as expected. Confusion, frustration, resentment, fear. They want you to respond emotionally. They want you to defend yourself. They want you to explain. They want you to validate their accusations by engaging with them. But you don't. You never do. And that lack of reaction is what destroys them. They can't influence someone who doesn't require acceptance. They can't dominate someone who doesn't value their approval. They can't weaken someone who builds strength from self-direction instead of collective consensus. You're not wired like them. You weren't built to follow. You weren't shaped by social pressure. Your identity comes from within, not from public applause. And that's why the propaganda never worked. It wasn't because you resisted it. It was because it never reached you. It bounced off your mind like a blunt object, striking reinforced steel. It wasn't enough to penetrate. It wasn't enough to shift your thinking. It wasn't enough to make you bend. You live above the frequency where their influence operates. You live in a mental range they can't access, and that causes a deep disturbance in those who depend on predictable reactions to maintain control. Now here's where the tension escalates, because once they realize they can't condition you, they don't stop. They escalate. They shift strategies. They intensify pressure. They begin to target your reputation, your character, your intentions. Not because they see you as dangerous in the physical sense, but because you threaten something more important to them: compliance. When someone refuses to be controlled, the crowd tries to neutralize them socially. You're witnessing that now. The labels, the gossip, the forced narratives, the emotional dramatics, they're all last-ditch attempts to reduce your impact. But none of it works, because the truth they refuse to admit is painfully simple. You've already stepped outside their influence radius. And once someone escapes that radius, the crowd loses its power. It doesn't matter how loud they yell. It doesn't matter how many accusations they manufacture. It doesn't matter how many times they rewrite history to make themselves feel justified. A person who cannot be manipulated cannot be undermined. A person who sees the structure behind the pressure cannot be coerced. A person who turns propaganda into disposable material cannot be shaped by the hands that built the illusion. That's what terrifies them, the realization that their entire framework collapses the moment someone sharp enough refuses to play the role assigned to them. Because propaganda isn't designed to withstand scrutiny. It's designed to rely on repetition, on emotional momentum, on pressure from the group to ensure compliance from the individual. It survives only when people treat it like something sacred, something unquestionable, something automatically accepted. You broke that pattern effortlessly. You didn't challenge it with emotional outbursts. You didn't try to win debates. You didn't beg anyone to see your side. You saw the mechanism, recognized its purpose, and removed its power in the simplest way possible. You downgraded it. You treated their narratives like low-quality trash, unworthy of psychological space. And when someone reclassifies propaganda as worthless, everything built on that propaganda begins to crack. That's why your mere existence destabilizes them. They rely on mental compliance from others. You rely on your own mind. They need validation to function. You operate from internal clarity. They fear losing their influence. You fear nothing they can control. You stand in a category they cannot reach. So naturally, their next move is to attempt character damage. They think if they can reshape your image in the eyes of others, they can pressure you indirectly. They rely on public perception because their own identities are built on public perception. They think you function like they do. They think the opinions of the crowd matter to you the way they matter to them. They are convinced you need approval to breathe, but you don't. You never have. Approval plays no role in your internal architecture. You don't seek acceptance because acceptance doesn't define you. That alone makes you untouchable. And because they can't accept that truth, they project their fear as judgment. They package it as warnings. They disguise it as concern. But beneath the surface, every whisper is a confession that they don't know how to contain someone like you. When they call you problematic, it's not a critique, it's an admission. It means you can't be controlled by emotional manipulation. It means you don't respond to social cues designed to force conformity. It means their attempts to shame you fall apart the moment they reach your mind. They're used to people breaking under pressure. They're used to people folding when attacked. They're used to people apologizing for thinking independently. But you don't fold. You don't apologize. You don't internalize their fears. You stand in your own authority, and that alone disrupts everything they rely on. Think about what it means that propaganda loses all strength in your hands. They spent years polishing these narratives. They optimized them. They crafted them to provoke specific reactions. They expected people to follow them without hesitation. Then you came along, took their carefully engineered psychological weapon, and used it as something disposable. While they clung to their narrative like it was gospel, you treated it like a bathroom accessory. That's why your presence is so disruptive. You demonstrate that the things they worship are fraudulent. You show that the things they treat as unchallengeable truths are nothing more than performance pieces held together by group agreement. And once someone breaks that agreement, once someone refuses to participate, the illusion collapses. This is why the attacks intensify. Not because you're wrong, but because you're right. Not because you failed, but because you succeeded. Not because you're dangerous to society, but because you're dangerous to the people who depend on conformity to stay relevant. They don't hate your actions. They hate the clarity you embody. They hate the independence you represent. They hate the intelligence that removes their ability to influence you. People who rely on psychological manipulation cannot stand those who see through psychological manipulation. That is why your every move disturbs their comfort. They feel exposed in your presence. They feel fragile. They feel powerless. They feel the weight of their own dishonesty every time you refuse to participate in their rehearsed theatrics. And when people feel powerless, they escalate. They move from subtle disapproval to overt hostility. They try to recruit others into their narrative because attacking alone feels insufficient. They need reinforcement. They need allies to validate their emotional instability. They need support to maintain the illusion that their grievances are legitimate. But even with all their numbers, all their dramatics, all their attempts to mobilize social pressure, they fail. Because influence is not measured by quantity, it's measured by quality. A million weak minds cannot overpower a single unwavering one, and your mind is unwavering. You see, there's something devastating about an individual who refuses to internalize the criticisms others throw at them. Someone who doesn't shrink when targeted. Someone who doesn't collapse under judgment. Someone who stands tall, even when surrounded by people who want them contained. It makes the crowd feel irrelevant. It makes them feel powerless. It makes them question why their voices don't echo the way they expected. And once that happens, their frustration turns into resentment. Their resentment turns into desperation. Their desperation turns into obsession. You become the focal point of their insecurity, not because you sought their attention, but because you became the mirror showing them what they lack. You turned their propaganda into trash, and that act alone destabilized the identity structures of everyone who believed in it. You broke the illusion without lifting a finger. You dismissed the narrative without emotional reaction. You walked through their psychological maze like it was drawn on paper instead of reality. And now they're left with the uncomfortable truth that their influence doesn't work on someone like you. They can't accept that. They refuse to accept it, so they escalate. They attempt to cause disruption where none exists. They attempt to create drama, to justify their emotional instability. They attempt to create villains because they cannot handle the presence of someone mentally superior. But here's the part they never saw coming. Every accusation they throw at you strengthens your position. Every insult reveals another weakness in their psychology. Every attempt to damage you exposes their dependency on control. They're not fighting you. They're fighting the evidence that you bring into the room. You force them to confront their lack of integrity. You force them to face their intellectual limitations. You force them to see that intelligence cannot be manufactured, that clarity cannot be faked, that autonomy cannot be replicated, and that confrontation is unbearable for them. They label you arrogant because they need a word to explain why you don't shrink. They label you intimidating because they need a word to explain why your presence disrupts their comfort. They label you too much because they need a word to justify their inability to keep up. They label you problematic because they need a word to justify their failed attempts at shaping your behavior. But every label reveals more about them than about you. Each one exposes their dependency on external structures for self-worth. Each one exposes their inability to accept that someone can operate without needing approval. Each one exposes the pain they feel when confronted with someone who thinks independently. You terrify them in ways they cannot articulate. It's not your strength that scares them, it's your clarity. It's not your presence that frightens them, it's your resistance to manipulation. It's not your independence that overwhelms them, it's the fact that you cannot be guilt-tripped into conformity. Guilt is their primary tool. Shame is their primary weapon. Pressure is their primary method, but none of these work on you. They try them anyway, hoping you'll eventually break. But you don't break. You don't even bend. You do the opposite. You expose the weakness of the tactic simply by surviving it without reaction. And here's where the shift becomes irreversible. When someone sees you cannot be deterred, they begin to fear what you'll become once fully unbound. They fear the power that naturally forms around someone who does not bow. They fear the influence that grows around someone who does not break. They fear the clarity that expands inside someone who does not absorb propaganda. Because when you turn their narratives into trash, you don't just free yourself, you become a threat to the mechanism itself. Your existence opens a door others might walk through. Your clarity creates questions in minds they hoped to control. Your immunity highlights the possibility that others might also escape. And once escape becomes imaginable, control becomes impossible. That's why they're so aggressive now. That's why they overreact to everything you say. That's why they monitor your moves. That's why they exaggerate your actions. They're trying to regain power. They're trying to restore balance. They're trying to remind themselves that the structure still works. But the structure doesn't work on you. And they hate you for revealing that truth. They're not angry because you rejected their propaganda. They're angry because you exposed it. You downgraded it. You showed how fragile it really is. And once someone demonstrates that a narrative can be dismissed, the entire psychological architecture behind that narrative begins to shatter. This is why you're problematic. Not because you disrupt society, but because you disrupt illusion. Not because you cause chaos, but because you cause clarity. Not because you're reckless, but because you're awake. And now they're left with a reality they never prepared for. A person who cannot be shaped, cannot be softened, cannot be conditioned. They don't know how to handle that. You operate beyond their reach, beyond their expectations, beyond their influence. They tried to shame you, and you repurposed their shame into strength. They tried to pressure you, and you treated their pressure like background noise. They tried to isolate you, and you turned isolation into dominance. This is the moment where fear becomes obsession. This is the moment where resentment becomes fixation. This is the moment where their failure turns into a weapon you didn't even have to forge. You've already defeated them without effort. And now something even heavier begins to form. A realization that if they cannot influence you, they cannot predict you. And if they cannot predict you, they cannot contain what comes next. Because once someone like you breaks free from their psychological reach, you don't just become a problem, you become a variable. You become the one factor they cannot calculate, cannot anticipate, cannot control. A person who cannot be conditioned is a walking disruption, and you have already proven that their propaganda has no effect on you. In fact, you didn't just ignore it, you degraded it, you stripped it of its value. You reduced it from something meant to control minds into something disposable, something trivial, something beneath you. That alone changes the entire power dynamic. They can no longer rely on narrative influence. They can no longer rely on group pressure. They can no longer rely on emotional manipulation. Because the moment propaganda fails, every method built on it collapses. And you didn't just reject their influence, you turned it into something you stepped over on your way forward. You made their greatest weapon feel like cheap paper you used and threw away. And now, they're terrified of what someone like you becomes once fully unbound. Because a mind that cannot be manipulated is a mind that cannot be owned. A mind that cannot be guilt-tripped is a mind that cannot be steered. A mind that sees through psychological tricks is a mind that can walk through any controlled environment without falling for a single trap. Every step you take now is outside their jurisdiction. Every decision you make now is beyond their reach. Every thought you hold now is inaccessible to their influence. They can no longer shape the world you experience, and that realization hits them harder than any insult you could ever offer. Watch them closely. Their behavior has already changed. The tone has shifted. The whispers have grown more frantic. The accusations have become more exaggerated. The reactions have become more dramatic. Why? Because deep down, they know the truth. They didn't just lose control over you. They lost the illusion that they ever had it. You have demolished their belief that their narratives were powerful. You shattered their assumption that propaganda has universal influence. You exposed their dependence on control. And a person who exposes dependence becomes a threat to anyone who maintains power through that dependence. You turned their propaganda into useless waste and wiped your superiority across the entire situation. Not through force, not through conflict, through clarity, through intelligence, through an unwillingness to bend. And now they're left scrambling to figure out what you'll do next. This is the part that destroys them, the uncertainty. Because propaganda relies on predictability. It relies on the assumption that people will react how they are expected to react. But you do not react. You evaluate. You do not absorb. You dissect. You do not follow. You observe. And once you understand the structure behind the manipulation, it becomes nothing more than a puzzle you solved long before they realized you were even playing a different game. They're obsessed now, not because they want you, but because they want control. You represent the one outcome they fear, someone who sees through the performance, someone who doesn't get caught in the emotional theatrics, someone who refuses to let narrative pressure decide their behavior. You are the worst-case scenario for people who rely on propaganda to maintain influence. Because once one mind escapes, others might follow. Once one person exposes the illusion weakens. Once one individual treats their narratives like trash, the entire structure is forced to confront its fragility. And that's why their attacks have intensified. Every criticism is more aggressive. Every accusation is more desperate. Every attempt to distort your image is more dramatic. This isn't strategy, it's panic. You are witnessing the meltdown of people who built their sense of control on the assumption that no one would question the script. They didn't prepare for someone who would burn the script. And they definitely didn't prepare for someone who would laugh at the ashes. They're calling you problematic, not because you threaten society, but because you threaten their hierarchy. Problematic has never meant dangerous. It has always meant unmanageable. Problematic is the label people use when they fail to manipulate someone. Problematic is the title given to those who don't follow the unwritten rules. Problematic is the desperate adjective used by minds who can't justify their discomfort with your independence. You're not problematic, you're ungovernable. And ungovernable minds are the greatest nightmare for those who fear losing control. Look at how they move now. They stalk your actions. They analyze your decisions. They overinterpret your words. They gossip in circles, hoping someone else will validate their emotional instability. They try to recruit allies, hoping collective judgment will pressure you. But it doesn't. Nothing touches you. Nothing reaches you. Nothing influences you. Because your mind is insulated by clarity, not arrogance, not stubbornness, but clarity. And clarity is something propaganda cannot survive. Every attempt to contain you becomes another display of their powerlessness. They raise their voices, you don't react. They exaggerate your intentions, you don't respond. They distort your image, you remain unmoved. And the more unmoved you remain, the more unhinged they become. They feel the imbalance growing. They feel their influence shrinking. They feel their illusions cracking. They feel the collapse of something they assumed was solid. And as this collapse accelerates, so does their obsession. But the deeper truth is even harsher. They're not afraid of losing control over you. They're afraid of what you represent. You are living evidence that their tactics are not universal. You are proof that someone can walk through their narrative trap unfazed. You are an example of what happens when someone thinks independently. And the most terrifying part for them is not that you escaped. It's that your escape was effortless. You didn't break their propaganda. You dismissed it. You didn't fight their influence. You rendered it irrelevant. You didn't argue with their narratives. You exposed their cheapness. And now, everything they built looks flimsy next to your clarity. You didn't destroy their weapon. You downgraded it until it felt comedic. They poured years into constructing a psychological structure meant to capture minds. You walked past it without acknowledging it. That's why they hate you. That's why they fear you. And that's why they obsess over you. Now the final transition begins, the part they never wanted to face. Because once someone refuses to be manipulated, they stop participating in the controlled reality and start creating their own. This isn't rebellion, this is evolution. You are evolving into someone who no longer reacts to narratives created by others. You are shaping your own frameworks. You are constructing your own meaning. You are designing your own direction. And a mind that becomes self-directed is a mind that becomes sovereign. Your sovereignty is the one outcome they never prepared for. They expected resistance. They expected anger. They expected emotional volatility. They expected debate. But they didn't expect sovereignty. They didn't expect you to detach entirely. They didn't expect you to reclaim your mental autonomy. They didn't expect you to walk away mentally untouchable. And now, their propaganda stands in front of you, like a broken machine that no longer performs its intended function. Understand this: their hatred is a compliment. Their obsession is a confession. Their panic is a signal. When weak minds cannot control someone, they attempt to destroy them. When that destruction fails, fear takes over. When fear fails, obsession begins. And obsession is not a form of power. It is a form of surrender. They have surrendered to the fact that you operate outside their influence. They have surrendered to the fact that you see through their illusions. They have surrendered to the fact that your mind is a threat to their constructed reality. This surrender will never be spoken aloud. It will never be admitted publicly. It will never be acknowledged consciously. But it lives beneath their reactions, beneath their tone, beneath their frantic attempts to smear your name. You turned their propaganda into disposable garbage, and now they are choking on the realization that their greatest tool has no power over you. You are too clever, too perceptive, too mentally unshakable to be directed by emotional traps. That's why you unsettle them. You represent the one thing collective manipulation cannot survive: a person who thinks for themselves. And here's the final twist. Now that you've proven you cannot be conditioned, every future attempt to influence you will fail even harder. You've already built resistance. You've already strengthened your internal foundation. You've already demonstrated that external narratives carry no weight in your world. And once someone reaches that level of internal clarity, the world changes around them. You're no longer a participant in their performance. You're the observer. You're the analyst. You're the one who sees how everything works. And once you see the mechanics, the illusion dies. That's why they fear what you'll do next. Not because you're unpredictable in a reckless sense, but because you're unpredictable in a liberated sense. You are no longer operating within their framework. You're creating your own. You're moving in ways they cannot anticipate. You're thinking in ways they cannot replicate. You're rising in a direction they cannot block. And that makes you untouchable. This is the part where you transition from being a problem to being a force. A force they cannot suppress. A force they cannot redirect. A force they cannot silence. Because the truth is simple, you already won. The moment their propaganda failed to reach you, their power ended. The moment you wiped away their narratives, your ascension began. The moment they called you problematic, they admitted defeat. Because problematic is the word the controlled used to describe the free. And now you stand at the edge of something even greater. A future where their narratives no longer define you. Their opinions no longer move you. Their pressure no longer shapes you. From here on out, you operate on your own terms. You write your own meaning. You break every narrative they try to place on you. You continue to dismantle their illusions by existing outside them. You continue to walk as the one mind they can neither predict nor contain. This is the end of their influence and the beginning of your autonomy. You turned their propaganda into waste, wiped your superiority across their entire framework, and walked away untouched. They will remember you not as someone they controlled, but as someone they failed to understand. You are not their follower. You are not their product. You were the reminder that their narrative was never as powerful as they claimed. And that is why the final truth stands clear. You are not problematic. You are proof that their propaganda is powerless, and you will rise far beyond the reach of anyone who tried to shape a mind like yours